So I have been a teacher for just under 10 years, and I teach at Tuxford High School. I've been an examiner as well as a marker, and have been approached by junior tuckies to give you these preparation strategies for your 3 papers. Now, when we talk about English in Tshwane South, we talk about English being the heartbeat of the school. So think about a heart for a second, not the emoji, the heart inside of you. That heart pumps blood to every single part of your body, even your very tippy toes and your pinky finger. Okay? Now, what do they mean by that? They mean that if you are able to read and express yourself in an accurate way, you're able to do that not just for your English subject, but you're able to do that for every single subject. So that is why English is the heartbeat of the school. So, with the notes that you have received, you have each gotten a copy of last year's exam paper. Paper 1, Paper 2, and Paper 3. I've given this to you, and you will see why it is necessary that I've given it to you to work through. Additionally, I have a pack of notes which you can follow along with. You need to follow along with a pack of notes during the presentation. You can write on these notes. If you have any additional notes, you can write on the pad that you've been given. And afterwards, there will be some reflective questions that you can then go through when you prepare for your exams. You can re-go through these notes, and that should help you. Okay, it seems that everyone, with the exception of 2 people, have received their notes, so let's get started. What I want you to have in front of you is the notes that says English Preparation Strategies. And then in your hand, a pen. If you do not have your exam papers, there's about 4 or 5 of you who do not have exam papers. That is okay. We can always get you some more, and you can share if you need it. But the most important is to have the notes that say English Preparation Strategies. Everyone has a copy of that. Okay. So, paper 1. Paper 1 is our language exam. That is what I'm going to start with. Each paper I am going to compare to something. To paper 1, I am going to compare paper 1 to baking a cake. Has any of you ever baked a cake before? Okay. Well, some of you are fortunate enough to have baked cakes, and some of you are even more fortunate that in your future lies the opportunity to bake a cake. Now, you will know from baking that the key is in preparation. You prepare all your ingredients, you put them together, you take out your equipment, and you make sure that you've got your individual bowls with everything that you need to add at certain times. Sometimes some ingredients even have to be left at room temperature, so you have to prepare long in advance before you actually bake the cake. Then the next step is mixing it all together, and the last step is baking. So you will see I've put these 3 steps out on your notes. What am I comparing the preparation to? The preparation is these notes, these slides, and some of the work that you will do a few days before your paper. Okay? Mixing is the studying that you have to do for paper 1. You can also use these notes. These notes will tell you exactly what to study. And baking is what? Sleeping. Okay, so you will note that the preparation for paper 1 is a lot more than the studying for paper 1. And sleeping is important so that this does not happen. Okay? So here we have someone not enjoying a cake. 1 slice of cake, delicious. 2 slices of cake, wonderful. 3, now I'm starting to get full. Stuffing my face with an entire cake. There is no enjoyment. There is no nourishment. This means, people, that hour before you write paper 1, using that red and yellow book your teachers tell you to buy, that's not going to help you. Stuffing your face with all the information that you need for paper 1 is not going to help. You need to sleep the night before you write paper 1. You do your preparation, you do the small amount of studying for paper 1, you sleep, and then you go and you write. This is a very good guide for all your subjects. Sleep helps you to process things in your brain. So stuffing is never going to help you. Let's take a brief look at time. So that's the next picture I have there for you. You have 10 minutes reading time and you have 2 hours in total. A brief guide, you have 55 minutes for the comprehension, 30 for your summary. There's a question that I've asked you there which you can refer to later when you go through these notes. Your visual literacy can take you 30 minutes and then you have 5 minutes spare. And these 5 minutes you can use to go back to anything that you've missed and perhaps look over a few things. So, what is my 10 minutes useful for? It must be used for the comprehension. When you go through your exam paper with the chief invigilator, you satisfy your curiosity. You look through your summary, you look through your advert, you look through your cartoon. You see what the language is about. Now you put all of that out of your mind and you spend those 10 minutes on reading. This is not the time to wink at your friend, to stare at the shoes of the invigilator. No. This is used for your comprehension. This is 30 marks of the 70 marks. If you do not understand what is happening in this text, multiple questions will not be able to be answered. So you have to understand what is going on. If you look later on at the title of that section, it says Reading and Understanding Texts. Okay, so that is the most important thing. Now, how do I use these 10 minutes step by step? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this thoroughly. 10 minutes, people, this is our cheat. We're able to read it thoroughly, we're able to read it slowly because we have 10 minutes without a pen in our hand. What else can we do but read the comprehension as thoroughly as possible? And then the next thing that we're going to do is go to the questions, force ourselves to look at the questions and the mark allocations of the questions. And then the next thing that we do is we go back to the comprehension and we skim read. What do I mean by skim reading? We can practice. So if you see on your notes, I've taken a small bit out of the November 2023. So skimming is when you glance through the text, picking up a few words here and there. That's what it means to skim. So here you can write down I've asked you in your notes, what does this mean? I've given you a definition, and you can copy it down. So many of us do this the first time we read the comprehension, and then we only go and read the paragraphs that are referred to in the questions. This is not going to help you to actually answer the questions properly, effectively, and fully. This is why we do the double approach. Reading it thoroughly when there is nothing else to do but read. Reading the questions, skimming through the comprehension again. So, I'm going to show you how to skim. Follow with me in the notes. Listening, reading. Audiobooks, podcast, voice note, generational shift, we understand the world. Insomniacs, okay, I see that there's a point there, I'll go back to it later. Dog owners, trudging around the park, do it in the gym, I've taken it to doing it in the car, long journeys through the dark, need distraction from everything circling in my head. Do you see that I'm not reading every single word? I'm just allowing my eyes to pick up certain words. Now, this does not help us if we haven't already read it properly the first time. Having read it properly the first time, we already have the general content, and now we're just familiarizing ourselves with the main ideas. We allow our eye and our brain to work here, just falling on the important words, not going over everything again. So people, even if your invigilator says your time has started, first follow this process. I know it works. So most recently, the way I know it works is because I too am studying. I am doing a course part-time. And there is a lot of reading involved in this course. And I have followed these same approaches, and it has worked for me. So I can tell you that it will work for you. Remember, it's a 30-mark component. So now, once you have skimmed through the comprehension, you go to question 1. And you're going to read question 1 aloud. Read question 1 aloud. How? You're in an exam. You're not allowed to make any noise. You cannot read it aloud. So let's practice reading aloud without making any noise. In your head now, none of you, make sure your mouth is completely closed. In your head, sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Let's all do it. Are you able to do it? Yes. Okay, so here's a little interesting nerd fact for you. When you sing aloud, you are using one part of your brain. When you sing the way you've just sung now, quietly, you're using 3 parts of your brain. The more parts of the brain that you use, the more you're able to process and understand something better. This means that you can read your questions aloud without making a sound. Let's practice it with the question that I've given you, 1.1 in your notes. Let's read it aloud together without making a sound. Okay, so you are able to do this, and by doing this, you're able to comprehend something a bit better. Now, the only catch is that it takes longer to read this way. So this tactic might not work for every single question. That is why it is so important to prepare before paper 1. And one of the ways that you prepare for paper 1 is to actually do a comprehension a few days, even the night before. you write paper 1. By practicing this, you're able to practice your timing and to see, okay, I'm a fast reader, I can spend more time on the questions. Oh, I'm a slow reader, I cannot use this technique for every single question, so I'm going to use it for the questions that I know are difficult. The 3-mark questions, the 4-mark questions, the questions that I do not understand immediately. So that is why prep is more important than studying in paper 1. Okay, so now once you have read through your questions and you're starting to answer all your questions, you're going to start with the process of highlighting and underlining the keywords and the question words. Again, people, this takes practice. It might not be able to work for you for every single question. You need to practice through this text that I've given you, paper 1. Go through it, following all these steps. See how it works for you. Adjust. But if you understand what the question word is and what the key word is of the text, then you're able to answer the question very effectively. So if we look back at that question I've given you on your notes, why does the writer use it repeatedly in paragraph 1? Does anyone want to tell me what the question word is? Okay, so that is why. And then the next thing is what the key word is. So the key words here is it repeatedly. Not why the writer wrote paragraph 1, but why the writer used it repeatedly in paragraph 1. So the meaning of it in this paragraph is going to be what gets you the mark. Not he wants to inspire us to read. Although that is the point of the text, it is not why he repeatedly uses it. You would not be able to get your mark for this question if you did not know what the key word of the question is. So, practice later on, before paper 1, going through the paper and working out all the key words, all the question words, so that you can see. And the more you do this, the more skill you build in this way, the easier it becomes. So you're going to then use all of these keywords, all these question words, you go through the entire text and you answer it. The questions will even refer back to some paragraphs, some lines. You can go back to those lines, go back to those paragraphs. If you do not understand something in those paragraphs, in the lines that the questions refer to, read it aloud. Okay, read it aloud without making a sound so that you can try and understand it better. Okay. I've said that and I have said that. The key is our cake metaphor. So if you turn to your next page, you see I've given you all the notes that I've spoken through in the presentation. I want to refer to the final question of the comprehension. But do you see that I've also included a text box there for you? These are the main question words that you get in a comprehension. In your own time, you can go through these question words, looking through them and making sure that you understand what they are. For example, there is a very big difference between comparing something and defining something. There is a very big difference between comparing something and commenting on something. So go through this at a later stage. This is why I say these notes will help you with studying. So you get many different types of questions, as I've said, in this text, but I want to specifically speak about the scary one. So we have the questions that they give us on text B. So this is usually a picture of some sort. Now, a sneaky tip to remember for text B is that they are actually leading you to a specific answer. So make sure you refer to the questions of text B when you look at the final question in the paper. So the examiner does this. So an examiner is the person who sets the paper. And what they are trained to do is actually to lead you to a certain idea within the paper. That is why the questions, you will note, usually start off with the beginning of the comprehension and they end off with the end of the comprehension. You will also note that the questions get increasingly difficult. So they start off with the easy questions and then they become more and more complicated as it goes on. Now, right at the end, you get given a comparative question. This is the one where you have to compare text A to text B. This is the easiest question in the entire comprehension, but it is often thought to be the hardest because it is not approached in the correct way. The first thing that you have to realize, and I know this because in the past 10 years of teaching, I have read the memos for every single grade 12 exam paper. And I have seen that for this comparative question, they always compare positively to one another. Always. You have to find the link. But the comparison is always positive. So when they ask you, does text A link to text B? You always say, yes. You do get credited if you say no. The memo does tell me that I'm allowed to mark alternative responses. But why make it complicated for yourself? Look for the link. Say that they do compare. Okay. And now, the next step that you do after you've said yes is you summarize the main content of text A and you summarize the main content of text B. Be careful though, very recently they have started to introduce a little trick for you, and this trick is that they refer to a specific paragraph. So make sure that you're looking at your question words here, that you are referring to a specific paragraph if they want that. This, people, is why it is so important to focus on the question words and the keywords in the comprehension. Let's look at some troubleshooting. So this is at the bottom of your notes on page 2. What do you do if you do not understand a word and they ask you to define that word? Okay? The first thing you ask yourself is this a positive word or is it a negative word? This usually helps you. Even if you just write down, this is positive about something, you might even just get 1 mark out of 3 or even 1 mark out of 2. So ask yourself the question. Let's practice one. So I've used the word primitive. I'm sure that many of you know what this is. But think to yourself, does this sound like a positive word or a negative word? Negative. It's negative, okay? So this is why we should practice. Okay, a negative word. What about the word consensus? Negative. That is a difficult one, but it is positive. Okay? So, in other words, we have to use a little bit of instinct here. What about the word frantically? Negative. Okay, that is obviously negative. So this helps you just place yourself, okay? The writer is trying to be positive about something. So what kind of positive emotions do I get? I get positive emotions like tenderness. I get positive emotions like joyfulness. I get positive emotions like excitement. Or, okay, negative emotions. Okay, if the writer's trying to be negative, is it negative like he's angry? Or negative like she's sad? What type of negative feeling do I get from this word? And that usually helps you to at least get 1 mark. The other thing that you can also look at is the context. So the context will usually help you to figure it out if you cannot define it yourself. I wish we could practice, a bit more on this, but unfortunately we cannot. But fortunately you know how to prep your cake. So you're going to go home and you're going to practice this at home. So there are also some rules that we have to deal with when we look at our comprehension. Some of the rules is that there is a specific mark allocation. Okay, so you have to look at your mark allocation. People, reflect on yourself. If you are giving an answer to something that is 3 marks and you've written 1 sentence down, surely you must realize that this is not adequate enough. And then the other rule for comprehension is that you have to use your own words when answering. Unless they ask you to quote, and they almost never ask you to quote. Unless they use the word diction, which means word choice, you never quote. You always interpret it yourself. So even if you write something down and you change the order of the words, that's better than copying from the text. You are going to get 0 marks if you copy from the text. You have to use your own words. Okay, I'm going to speak more about using this when we speak about transactions. Yes?
Miss, say the mark allocation is 3 marks, but I write like a paragraph of 10 sentences. Is the examiner going to mark everything, or do they mark a certain number of sentences?
For English home language, I know, I've marked paper 1, they have to mark everything. So on the memo it says they mark holistically. That means everything. Okay. I know that in some languages it is slightly different, and your teacher would have alerted you for that. I'm thinking specifically about first additional language Afrikaans. I know first additional language Afrikaans, they read for points. So in other words, if you have made 3 points and the mark was 3, they stop after 3. But for first additional language English, I have not marked this personally, but a colleague of mine has. They have to mark everything. Everything that you've put down, they will mark. And they will mark your pencil as well. Be careful for paper 1. Paper 1, sometimes they're a bit strict on pencil, but I know for paper 3, they will mark your pencil as well. Okay. This idea that the markers at the end of the year are very negative and they want to take marks away from you, this is not true. They are constantly told, we are constantly reminded that there is a student behind the paper. We are constantly reminded to mark everything you've presented. There was a question over there? Yes?
So you said if a question says I'm going to use your own words, and I use exactly the same way to write it in passive form, like mark right or wrong.
Yes, but the thing is, you are not going to get any kind of total mark. They are trying to see that not only can you read, because you are illustrating that you can read, okay? But they're also trying to see that you can understand. So reading and understanding is needed in order to get the total for that question. One more.
And would you advise answering question 1 first or last?
I always advise question 1 first, but this is why preparation is important. So you need to be able to look at yourself and look at your own strengths and see, perhaps I'm someone who always gets 10 out of 10 for the summary. I'm someone who always gets an advert or a cartoon high marks for that. I always get high marks for language. If that then is your focus, then I would advise you to do that. But the thing is, you write in the morning, your brain is fresh, you have a lot of time, and that is why, because of the huge components of this paper, I would advise you to start this one first. One more, and then I have to move on.
So, if let's say you start with question 5, language, and you don't start with question 1, do you advise us to use the 10 minutes reading time for the comprehension, even if you're not going to start with it?
Okay, so let's say you start with question 5, then logically I would say still allocate 10 minutes for your time whenever you do your comprehension. Look at the watch that they've got in front and use 10 minutes to read. Okay, so you adjust according to yourself. Again, prep, key. What if you are slow? What if you are a slow person, slow reader? So what? You have 55 minutes. You do what you can in 55 minutes, you move on, and if there is time, you come back. Okay? Don't panic because you're slow. What if you are a fast person? And I know that there are many fast people here who just want to get it over and done with. Why are you fast? You have to sit there for 2 hours. Why not use your full 2 hours? And then what if you overthink? Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. In other words, you take 2 breaths and you focus on your recipe. What is your recipe? Your recipe is underlining the keywords, going to the question word, looking at the mark allocation, reading aloud. Okay, so once you start overthinking, you say, name, stop this. 1, 2, keep it simple. What is the keyword? What is the question word? Let me read it aloud. Let me refer back to the paragraph. Let me look at the mark allocation. Pen in my hand, I answer. What if you underthink? And I'm sure there are many underthinkers here. Okay? An underthinker, the best instrument is to have a pen. If you've got a pen in your hand, it's like something magical starts happening. And you're focused. If you underthink, do the keyword thing. Okay. Let's move on to summary. So here we are focused on. So this is the next slide, the next paper. Here we are focused on getting 10 out of 10 for the summary. 10 out of 10? It's possible. I promise you it's possible. In order to get 10 out of 10 for the summary, you have to know how we mark the summary. So perhaps write a few notes here for yourself. How is the summary marked? The summary is marked 7 points for 7 facts. 3 marks for language. Now, contrary to popular belief, this language does not refer to grammar or spelling. You can be the worst speller in the whole of the exam room. You can be the worst speaker of English, and you can still get 3 out of 3 for language, because the language refers to the quoting, but specifically something we call quoting verbatim. Okay, so another important point that you can make sure you've got down: if you are writing first additional language English, you are writing in point form. Your instructions say write in point form. You're using your instructions to help you here. But for home language learners, you write in paragraph form. This gives us a bit of a cheat in home language. It means we can combine multiple points into one sentence, and we can write as many points as possible. So even though our instructions say 7, I am here to tell you that the summary you will get at the end of the year will have 10 points in it. 10 or more. Last year, 11 points in the summary. Year before, I think there were 9. The year before that, 13. There are more than 7 points in your summary. I'm hoping that some of your brains are going, so that means if I'm writing in paragraph form, if I'm not bullet pointing, I can include everything that I think is a point, even if I might be wrong, but I can still get 7 points because they have to mark the entire summary. The limit for home language is not 7 points. The limit for home language is 90 words. That's it. First additional language is different. Here you have to write 7 points. Unfortunately, no cheat there. Okay. So, what does it mean to quote verbatim? Here I'm speaking about the language. Let me just quickly put a brief timer on here. Here I'm speaking about the language that you use. To quote verbatim means to quote everything word for word. Everything word for word. For example, if the original text says, to be a leader requires effective communication, and your response is, a leader requires effective communication, have you quoted?
No.
You have not quoted verbatim. You have changed one word, and therefore you get the mark for the point, and you still retain your 3 language marks. Here is a nice cheat for all of us. It means that we don't have to think very hard for summary. It means that, just like on the computer, you click, drag, right-click, copy, paste. That is what they're testing for the summary. They are testing, can you copy and paste? They're not testing reading and understanding, which is what they do with comprehension. They are just testing, copying and pasting. And this is why you will find your strongest students do the worst in summary, because they think too much. You do not have to think a lot with summary. You have to copy and you have to paste. So this is the very big danger that I want to alert you to. And this refers to, at the top of your notes here, I have something that says, what is something you should avoid when dealing with the text? And what you should avoid is changing the meaning of the words. People, if you quote everything in your summary, you can still get 7 out of 10. Huh? But if you change the meaning, you will lose the mark completely. So, for example, to be a mentor requires effective communication. Will this get the mark? Is a mentor and a leader the same thing? It's not. It changed the meaning, and so the students lost their marks because they tried to change the key words. Unfortunately, you think that you're doing a good thing by changing the keywords. You're not. So my suggestion is, do not change the keywords. Change the sentence around the keywords of the point. Okay. So I've already done this. The tip for first additional language and for home language. Home language, our aim is no longer 7, but 9. 90 words, not 7 points.
Ma'am, at my school, every English teacher says that if you quote 4 consecutive words, then it's considered birthday.
I understand why they've said that, but when they mark, the entire sentence has to be quoted. Okay, so you will see that some sentences are very long in your summary, some sentences are very short. The rule is that from the start of the sentence to the end of the sentence. So we essentially on our side, if you ever look at the memorandum for this, you will see exactly how the teacher has to mark. So Google the memorandum once you've done it, and you will see they've got a block that says quoting verbatim, and the entire sentence is in that block. So we who mark the summary have to check that we literally have to check that you've quoted every single word in that entire sentence. So understand why your teacher has said that. And I'm not saying that she's wrong in doing that. She's trying to avoid you losing the language marks. But the perspective that I'm coming from is from sitting down and actually marking thousands of summaries and knowing that that rule is actually redundant. I used to teach my pupils the same way before I marked paper 1, and I realized that I'm actually disadvantaging them. I'm making it more difficult for them, and they can get 10 out of 10 if they use the keywords a lot easier than changing it. Okay, so measure what you've heard from me and what you've heard from your teacher. Why don't you keep the keywords but change the words around it? Then you've kind of pleased me and you've pleased your teacher. Okay. Okay, I have to move on to the rest of paper 1 so that we can talk about paper 2. I have got a few rules here, but you do not have to write them down. In actual fact, what I've included for you to study later is something that says how to ace the summary. You see that? So that you can use to study later, and this is something that you can read through for yourself the night before you write paper 1, just to remind yourself of everything that I've said to you today. Okay, so let's look at the visual literacy. Here I'm speaking about adverts and cartoon, and I want you to think for a few seconds. Who created the advert and the cartoon in the text? Is it your teacher who created it? Is it the examiner, the person who sent the paper? Or is it an actual advertiser or an actual cartoonist who created it? It is. C. This tells us that someone is making money off of that advertisement. Someone is making money off of that cartoon. It was published in a newspaper. They make a salary from it. People, that means the advert is effective. Whether you like the advertisement, whether it appeals to you or not, it is effective. It tells you that the cartoon is funny. Whether you think it is funny, whether it suits your humor or not, it is funny. Someone made money off of it. Your trick is to find what makes it effective. Okay, so here I've also given you a picture from the paper that you're going to work through, and I've given you some tips. We do not have time to go through this, but fortunately it is in your notes. So when you are looking at an advertisement, look at the background. In 2020, we had the hardest English paper that we've had in probably 10 years. So just imagine those poor pupils. 2020 and a very difficult paper. You can, for your own curiosity, go and look at it. The summary, for example, was, I think, 20 words longer than it's meant to be. The comprehension was 30 words longer than it was meant to be. And the advertisement that they included was not a good one, according to me, but very effective. If you look at the background of that particular advertisement, the background gave 2 marks, and everyone ignored the background because we always focus on the foreground. Look at the background. Look at the birds. What is she standing on? She's standing in a wheat field. All of these things can contribute to your understanding of the cartoon and the effectiveness of the visuals in the cartoon. So do not neglect the background. Of course, you have to look on the foreground, and of course, in this case, the foreground is the focus. Here they are selling jeans, and they are selling to, I would say, young to middle-aged people. So I'm thinking probably 18 to 30. Obviously, women, and a particular type of woman, someone who likes to be stylish and comfortable, etc., etc. So that's the first tip that I have for you. Look at the pictures, background, foreground, think about what are they focusing, think about what are they selling and who they are selling to. Then if we go to the next paper in your notes, we're looking at page 4. Here we are looking at our cartoon. Some of the tips that we have for cartoon. Try and figure out what kind of humor are they using. What body language and what facial expression are they expressing. Again, unfortunately, people, I cannot go through this thoroughly with you, but look at frame 2. Look at the body language. I can bet my bottom dollar, in other words, the 2 cents left in my bank account, I can bet that they're going to ask a question about the body language in frame 2. Okay? and contrasting the body language frame 2, frame 4. Then look at the facial expression of frame 3. Again, we can bet that they're going to ask something about the facial expression, contrasting the facial expression from frame 1 to frame 3. Okay, so look at these things, that will help you. And then, again in your notes, I have included a little block of all the visual effectiveness of an advert, as well as the verbal effectiveness of an advert, which is called diction. So sometimes they'll use the word verbal, sometimes they'll use diction. There's a list for you to study, and I've done that for both advertisements and cartoon. You must know this off by heart, okay? You must know that a technique that an advertiser will use is the emotional appeal. A technique that an advertiser will use is imperative language or commanding language. They will use rhetoric language. They will use sound devices, personal pronouns, humoristic devices. They will use statistics. They will use gimmicks. You must know this off by heart, so that when they ask that question, and they will ask the question, what is effective? You can say, the emotional appeal is effective because of this, this, and this. Or if they ask, what technique is going to be used? Then you can say, the technique of using personal pronouns. So if you know all the different techniques that an advertiser will use, you will be able to get 3 out of 3, because that question is always 3 out of 3. Same with cartoon. A cartoonist will use body language. Always they will ask body language, or they will ask facial expression. A cartoonist will use different fonts, different symbols. They will use register, the way we speak. So all of these things, you know them off by heart, and you're able to answer your questions. And then what I have also included for you is the humoristic devices that they could use in a cartoon. So I've given the list to you, and I've also said what they are. Know what these are, so that when they ask you, what is the humor, what is funny, what is effective about the cartoon, you can say, well, it is effective because it makes use of irony. It is effective because it makes use of satire. You know this, you know it off by heart, and you're able to use it because they will ask you a question about the humoristic devices that are used in a cartoon. Last thing is your language. Oh, I just wanted to say for home language, what they've started doing is they've included between 3 to 4 marks of the adverts in the cartoon. They have included language questions there. So just make sure that you are aware of that. So how do I prepare for language? This is now the final question. Here I've given you a checklist, which you can use at a later stage. Here, you are not spending hours studying for language. Why do we not spend hours studying for paper 1? Because we do not know what they are going to ask. Because English has millions of words, millions of parts of speech, millions and trillions of sentences that can be converted from active to passive voice, direct to indirect speech. We cannot spend hours studying when we do not know what they are going to ask, and when ultimately all of this is 1 mark. Active and passive voice, max will be 2 marks in your paper, maximum. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't prepare for it? No. That is why you use the checklist and you see, do I know the parts of speech? Would I be able to answer these questions? Yes. What is a prefix, suffix, and root word? Let me quickly go check. Okay, no, I've got it. Am I able to change the form of a sentence? No. I've forgotten how to do this. Let me quickly go back to my English book, go back to my notes, look on the internet to see how to do this. Okay, I've got it. You don't spend hours studying the things that you know, you revise the things that you do not know. Of course, first additional language, you spend a lot of time in grade 12 doing language. So you are fortunate. You simply follow your teacher's notes that she's given you. Your language component counts 20 in your paper. Unlike home language, only 10. Well, 14. Okay. So that is paper 1. You can have your cake.
And eat it too.
And eat it too. Okay, so now we're going to speak about paper 2. What metaphor do you think I'm going to use? Paper 1, cake. Paper 2? No, you cheaters, you're not allowed to. Okay. I'm speaking about a good tackle. Okay. Yes. A good tackle is what you use when you deal with paper 2. Think for a second. Who's tackled someone before? Okay. So, I don't know if I should call you fortunate or unfortunate. Maybe the rest of us who haven't will see in the future. I don't think I've ever tackled anyone, but I can imagine, because I can use my imagination, what it must be like to tackle someone, okay? Someone is tough. They've got bones, they've got skin, they've got muscle. That impact force must be tough to hit, okay? But just imagine going with all that force. I'm running up, I'm preparing myself, I'm pushing onto that person, but instead of hitting the person, I miss. All that force means I make contact with the ground. We do not want to miss our target. So, here, when you make a good tackle, you have to run up to your target, you get into position, and then there is contact acquired. So what is the run-up in paper 2? Learning. Write it down. Write it there for yourself so that you remember. The run-up to paper 2 is the learning. How do you get into position for paper 2? You read the instructions of paper 2 the day before your exam. Lucky you have a paper 2. And then what is the contact? The contact is the reading time you are given in the paper and the actual writing of the paper. Here you will see a flip. The flip is less preparation than paper 1, more learning for paper 1. So paper 1, our emphasis is on preparing ourselves in all the ways I've mentioned. But in paper 2, you have to learn. So the majority of the notes that I'm giving you for this is strategies on how to learn. So, when we are talking about novels, dramas, and short stories, we learn using a mind map. Okay, so put poetry out of your head for a second. Think of novel. Here I'm talking about The Picture of Dorian Gray. I'm talking about Life of Pi, helping with first additional language. Is there a novel? I only think there's a drama, there's Macbeth, and then there's short stories. And then of course poetry, but we'll deal with poetry in a second. So quickly think for yourself where I've written in your notes how to study for your novel, short story, and drama. Quickly write down what genres you do for first additional language. Write them there. Oh, there is a novel, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So first additional language, write down what novel do you do. If you don't do a novel, are you doing a short story? Okay, then write their short stories. If you're not doing short stories or novel, you're doing a drama, Macbeth. Okay. Poetry we'll deal with later. So if first additional language, because you only do 2 genres, if one of your genres is poetry, we'll deal with that in a second. Now, home language, you do 3 genres, okay? One of them is poetry, we put that away for now, but you do a novel and you do a drama. Okay, so what novel are you doing? Life of Pi? Ah, wonderful, the best one. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Okay. And then, what drama are you doing? Who's doing the Crucible? Put up your hand. Okay, good. Nice ones on the Crucible. Then you've got a fair amount of you, I'm assuming, are doing Othello. And then the rest of us are doing Hamlet. So you are obviously focused on these genres. Okay. So let's go back to a mind map. People, it doesn't take that long to do this. Really, it doesn't. It is the most effective way to study content, not just in English, but in all subjects. Okay? I know this. Not only did I use a mind map when I studied for my exams, my matric exams and in university, but as I said, I'm doing a course at the moment. And at the end of every week of the course, I do a mind map on that course because it helps me. It helps me to memorize what I need to. Okay, so how exactly does doing a mind map work? Or, sorry, the question is, does it work? Okay, it does work. Because the best kind of learning always happens when you read something. After reading it, you write it. And in this case, you're summarizing the important points. And then the next part of this is speaking it. That is why your English teacher is such a professional at all the genres they do. Because they speak about it all the time. There is a poem that we do in home language, The Child Who Was Shot Dead. Okay? The first time I taught that poem, I had no idea what was going on. I was winging it. But as I started speaking, I figured out what it was about. So, speaking is the best way to process the information. So if you look at your speech bubble in your notes, I've written RWS. What does the R stand for? Reading. W, writing. S, speaking. So what is a nice tip for all of you? Find someone. Who's doing short stories first additional language? Okay, you've got so much to do there. Why don't you find someone and say, I will do these 2 short stories, you do those 2 short stories, you do those 2 short stories. We get together and we speak about them. I will teach you my short story, you teach me your short story. So by combining the work, you're actually making it easier. This is also a very good tip to use for poetry. Okay? Whose home language? 12 poems. Okay? Why don't you find 3 other people? Each of you prep 4 poems. And over a period of time, you just go through the poems together. Okay? So let's look at an example of how you would draw a mind map. Here you have to fill this in. I've given you the starting of a mind map with a circle at the bottom. Okay? And you are going to draw the things that you need to summarize in order to answer all the questions. So I've just used the example of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Anyone who does it? One person. Okay, so I chose this because I knew that not many people would know it. Okay, so the first thing that you have to summarize with a story, so you can use your own example there. Let's say you do Hamlet, you can write Hamlet in the middle of your block. The first thing that you have to summarize is who are the main characters. Okay? So here you write down your main characters. So people, this is just an example, okay? I've written there Dr. Jekyll, and then you would write down the important facts about that person. And then the next one would be Mr. Hyde and the important facts. Let's say you do Hamlet. Of course, who's your main character? Hamlet. You would write important things down there. Then another main character would be Claudius. You would write important things down there. obviously with a play like Hamlet, you've got many main characters. So you would spend a lot of time summarizing this. But let's think of Macbeth, okay? Anyone who does Macbeth? Okay, let's not think of Macbeth. Let's think of the picture of Dorian Gray. Here we've only got 3 main characters, okay? You've got Basil, you've got Henry, and you've got Dorian. So, in other words, you are focusing on that. Life of Pi, I'm sure that there's many of you doing Life of Pi. There is one main character, Pi. Yes, there are then other minor characters that are important, but all of them link back to Pi. So here you would spend a lot of time on your main character. Okay. The next thing that you can list for yourself here is the imagery that is used. Imagery refers to the figures of speech or the sort of like symbols that are used. So I'm immediately thinking of in Life of Pi the island. Okay. I'm thinking of thank you for helping me there. The color orange, okay, for Life of Pi. In the picture of Dorian Gray, I'm obviously thinking of the color red that keeps repeating, the color white that keeps repeating, the imagery of mirrors, masks, shadows, and of course the picture. What was the other one we were speaking about? Hamlet. Okay, we're looking at the imagery of corruption. We're looking at the imagery of death. Okay, so that is what you're busy talking about here, your figures of speech. And then we have themes. So themes are the main ideas. Are you filling in your mind map? Yes. Okay. Themes are your main ideas. So, which one have I not spoken about in the Crucible? Here, I've done the Crucible 13 years ago. Someone give me a theme that you remember from the Crucible. Okay, some people have a lot of studying to do for the Crucible. Okay. What about truth? Surely truth versus lie. No, the theme is the main idea, like the main message of the story. Oh, okay, so like influence. Okay, influence. I mean, that is a main theme in the picture of Dorian Gray as well. The theme of influence. Yes? Hysteria. Thank you. Brilliant. I think that's what you will also try. Hysteria is a very big theme in the Crucible. I'm thinking of Hamlet. Hamlet's a very big theme is depression. Okay? Procrastination is a very big theme. Corruption. So, if you are uncertain about the themes, you can use Google very, very easily. This is the main idea. So those of you who were uncertain what I meant when I said theme, right next to theme on your mind map, right there. It is the main idea or the main message of the play or of the story. For short stories, your teachers will have given this to you. For the majority of you, I'm sure that your teachers have discussed these things, but you are now taking all of the things that you've discussed through the year, you're compiling it into one paper so that you can just look down at one paper and see, here's all my characters, here's all my images, here's all my themes. And then the last thing that you can do is you can talk a little bit about the plot. So, plot, right there on your mind map. Write for yourself. Where does the story start? What is the rising action of the story? What is the climax of the story? What is the falling action, which we also call the denouement? And what is the resolution, if there is a resolution? Okay, so I'm thinking of Life of Pi here. You know, the story starts in India, Pondicherry. It ends somewhere else in Canada. So what really helps you here is to just kind of get an idea of where I'm starting, where I'm ending. I'm thinking of the rising action many, many times in pi, but specifically when the boat, when the shipwreck is caused. Okay, so in Dorian Gray we have a very slow burn of rising action. Okay, the slow burn leading up until the point of Basil's death, and then later the stabbing of the painting. Same with the Shakespeares, the Macbeths and Hamlets will have a slow burn. Crucible, I mean, it has to be fast because the story is very short. But again, you know, you've got this, the rising action, all the hysteria is caused, and then eventually Proctor, who sacrifices himself for his wife. Don't quote me on Crucible. It's been a long time since I've done that one. Okay. So, this is something that I have personally found very useful in recent years. Life of Pi people, with your 100 chapters, here I can't help you very, very much. But you can figure out a way to do it, I'm sure. But for the rest of us lucky ones, the 5 acts of Hamlet, the 3 acts of the Crucible, 20 chapters of Dorian Gray, those sorts of things, what's really useful is to actually, so if you're doing the novel, even Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, very short, if you're doing these things, summarize, write a list of all the chapters, right there, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way down to 20, or however many chapters you have. And then write a small summary of what happened. So here I've given an example from Hamlet. This is from Act 1. I've written a list from Act 1, Scene 1, Scene 2, Scene 3, Scene 4, Scene 5, and I've just given a short description. Do you see how short it is? A short description of what happens in that. This is so useful, and I'm going to show you in a second why it is useful. Because if you look in paper 2, you will see that when they give you your contextual questions, what do they do at the bottom? They tell you where it came from. At the bottom they will say this came from Act 1, Scene 3. In the short stories, I went and I looked and I saw at the top of your short stories, they give you a brief description of the part that they've taken out. They've said to you, this happens there. So when you have this, and you've got this list in your mind, you can actually use it together, and it will help you with that question that you will get asked, which I'm sure all of you know. Place this scene in context. It really helps with that. But looking through all the exam papers across the different genres, across home language and first editional language, I actually saw how many questions get asked about plot. And I'm going to show you this in a second. But let me first show you this one. Questions from character. People, it took me probably 10 minutes of looking through the papers that I've given you. First editional language and home language. Look how many questions I found just from one paper on character. What does this reveal about so-and-so's character? I think I've only taken 2. He's a loyal man. Discuss your view. How does this influence your view of Sybil? So 3 questions on character. Here are some questions on theme. A victim of his own ambition. The influence Lord Henry has on Dorian. Here are some questions on imagery. So that's 5 in total. The figure of speech in these lines, why is it relevant? Discuss the description of the clock and what this reveals about the attitude towards upper-class Victorian society. So 7 so far. How does this influence your attitude towards pi? So this is questions on plot at this stage. Substantiate your response. Explain the circumstances that have led to this encounter. I mean, that's plot. This is what I was speaking about, the usefulness of memorizing the chapter order. So in other words, 10 questions that I got from your different respective papers in not even 10 minutes, based on those main points that you summarize. The point that I'm trying to make is that this mind map this technique is not useless. It doesn't take that much time. It really doesn't take that much time. But, I mean, of those questions, there's 18 marks for you. 18 marks from a mind map. The rest, insight. Okay, so make sure you know what is the imagery. Google if you don't know it. And if you haven't received proper notes. Make sure you know what are the themes of your story. Google. All of these stories are on SparkNotes, which is the first thing that comes up when you Google the story. Google the main characters. Even if you want, I don't know, why don't you try and use AI? I've never tried to use AI for this reason, but why don't you ask AI to summarize the plot of The Picture of Dorian Gray? I don't recommend using AI to do the mind map because the process of the mind map, remember, it refers back to reading, writing, and speaking. But, you know, we can use these things to make our lives a bit easier. Okay, so this is what I was speaking about. So this is from the Crucible. I've got this little, you can't see my pointer. So you've got this. You've got this for every single one of your genres. From short stories, novels, dramas, they always tell you where it is. And this will help you to place your story. Okay. I wanted to show you how useful it is. So here I've got a short story. The narrator is confused. There I've got some of the examples, the full statements of the case. Okay, look at all these questions. Place this in context. Describe the time and place where the extract is set. Based on your knowledge of the play as a whole, comment on Gertrude's loyalty towards Hamlet. Using these lines as a starting point, to critically discuss the impact this incident will have on Pye's life. Do you see how many questions are asked just on plot and just on the usefulness of memorizing the chapter order? Okay, so it is not useless. Okay. Now, first additional language, if you want to shut your being for 2 seconds, you can. I need to speak about how to write an essay for the home language people. So, all of you, look at your hand. Look at your hand. I'm hoping that you all see 5 fingers. Okay? Now, looking at your hand is a very nice way to transition from writing your contextual questions to writing your essay. Because the hand helps you with 2 things, writing your notes. The first thing the hand helps you to remember is that there are 5 steps to writing an essay. And there are also 5 paragraphs in your essay. Okay. We have to work quickly. The first step is to draw a mind map. Okay, so write it down. You'll have to scribble very quickly, people. You draw a mind map. The next thing that you're going to do, and we'll practice for a few seconds, you look at a topic. You look at the topic and you determine what the key words of the topic are, and you place the key words in the middle of that mind map. Step number 3, you work on your introduction. How do I work on my introduction? I state whether I agree with the topic or not. I define the topic in my own words, and I introduce my story. We'll practice this in a second. Do you see the example topic I've given you? Many characters in the Crucible are totally dishonorable and cannot be redeemed. You can even cross out the Crucible and write Hamlet, Dorian Gray, Life of Pi. Okay? What is the key word in that sentence? Many of the characters are totally dishonorable. Dishonorable is a key word, and redeemed. The idea of redemption. Okay. Do you agree? Then tell me. I agree partially. Do you agree? Yes. Do I agree? No. You don't have to say yes or no. I know that many of your teachers will have told you don't write yes or no. But you can say, many of the characters are. And that immediately tells me you are agreeing or you are disagreeing. Okay? Dishonorable. How can we say this in a different way? It doesn't have to be fancy. Is it good or is it bad? Bad. So I can be as simple as I want, and I can say there are many characters in the story that are bad, and nothing will ever save them. This story is about, and then you would just tell me what your story is about. This story is about a young man contemplating suicide. This story is about a young man who is shipwrecked at sea. This story is about a beautiful man who is living his best life in Victorian society. This story is about how hysteria can overwhelm a small village. Okay, so something brief, something short. You're telling your person who's marking, hey, I know what you're asking me. I know what you're asking me. And I know what my story is about. Read my essay. Listen to my argument. Then the fourth thing that you have to do is you have to think of points to prove your topic. Here you have to refer to your characters, you have to refer to the events that happen in your story as well as your themes. And you can use the Peel method. Anyone know what the Peel method is? I think everyone knows. Okay. There's another method, but I don't have time to speak about it now. The whole point of Peel, is to show you that you cannot just make a point. You have to explain it, and you have to give an example of it. Okay, I have to move on. So I'm going to just show you, there's an example of my mind map. There's an example of what we've done with the keywords, what we've done with the introduction, the body. Now I just want to speak about Peel. So the first thing that you're going to start off is you're going to make your point. For example, Manchester City is the best football team. This is my point. Okay? Now, my explanation is that many people desire to be part of this English team who have participated in many tournaments. And my example is that they're the first English team to win 4 straight top flight titles. And so, because of this, their excellent performance shows that they are the best team. Okay, we are creating Peel arguments wherever we go. Who disagrees that Manchester City is not the best team? Okay, so assuming, young man, what is the best team?
Liverpool.
Liverpool is the best team. So you would use you would use Peel to tell me that you have a point. Liverpool is the best team. That is your point. Then you would explain your point, you would give me examples, and you would say, therefore, this shows that they are the best team. Okay. We do this all the time. Strawberry ice cream is the best. I love fried chicken. Blah, blah, blah. I'm constantly arguing throughout my life, proving to other people that my opinion is the best one. I use Peel all the time. So now, knowing that you use Peel all the time, you can use it in your literature essay as well. Okay. By the way, people, here we are dealing again with the idea of language and this idea of spelling and grammar being the most important thing ever. Here, spelling and grammar is not the most important thing ever. The most important thing is paragraph structure. So you do not have to write a rough draft for your literature essay. If you look on page 8 of your notes, I've asked you there, do I write a rough draft for literature essay? You can write there, no. Because I get more marks for structure than I get for spelling and grammar. You can write essay riddled with errors. You will still get 7 out of 10 if you write a very good structure for a literature essay. Okay. The last component of paper 2 that I want to discuss is the poetry. So, there are a few things that you need to know for poetry. You need to know what diction is. You know what it is? Word choice. Write it there if you do not know. Diction refers to words. You know what imagery is? Figures of speech. Write it there if you do not know what it is. Sound device. Alliteration, etc. The structure, you need to know what is tone. This is always a difficult one. Tone is the writer's attitude. Okay, the writer's attitude. And then the theme or what the poem is about. That is what you need to know. So my suggestion for how to study poetry is to use something called mnemonics. Okay? So I've got a little speech bubble there for you. What are mnemonics? Mnemonics is where you use the first letter of keywords to spell a new word. Write the little definition there for yourself. Okay? You use the first letter of the keyword. You don't have to write the example because there will be many examples to follow. For example, I would remember the word bell to remember bearing, to remember experience, to remember life, longevity. Okay, so I've created another word, and every letter in that word gives me something to remember. So what word do I want you to remember for poetry? Distance. Okay? I actually had a song that I would sing to you. Play. But unfortunately, time constraints. But you can go and listen to the Michael Bolton song. I know, way before your time, way before my time. But anyways, Michael Bolton has a song called You Can Go the Distance. Okay? Very inspiring. Okay? I found myself singing it last night while I was doing laundry. Because I was thinking of the presentation. Okay, so look at why I say distance. Look here. Okay, so you go the distance. You remember D is for diction. You remember I is for imagery. You remember S is for structure. Sorry, let me take that arrow away. You remember S is for sound device. You remember T is for tone, T is for theme, and then there's a little A there for about. So by going the distance, you remember all the things that you need for poetry. Okay, so I just had all these arrows to show, but I won't do that now. Okay, there's some other mnemonics that you can use when it comes to answering the questions. You can use the mnemonic of tell, sell, and kneel. So my students will know I tell them a whole long story about this. How do you answer a poetry question? You start by telling, how do you answer a poetry question on tone? You start by telling. Say what the tone is. Okay? Explain the tone. Link it back to the question. How do you answer a question about diction? You pick up your cell phone. You choose some words. You explain those words. You link them back to the question. How do you answer a question about imagery? The hardest one of them all. You have to kneel down and pray. Kneel. Name the image. Explain the image. Say what the effectiveness is. Link it back to the question. And that is how we use mnemonics to study for literature. Okay. Also helps you to write the poetry essay. So, now that you have done all the run-up, you have to stay focused on your target. The next step is to get into position. To get into position is to go through the instructions the day before, okay? And you've got your instructions with you. So the day before you write paper 2, you're going to go through your instructions. You will see paper 2's instructions. There are a lot of them. And you need to do this so that you know first additional language, you know where am I going to find my genres, what must I answer within my genres. Home language, you need to go through your instructions to know what poetry questions do I need to answer, what literature essay do I need to answer, what contextual questions do I need to answer. Okay, so make sure that you do that. That is how you get into position. Okay? And then the last one is contact acquired. This is how to deal with your actual paper. So for home language, you're going to use your 10 minutes in a different way. You're going to use your 10 minutes by reading your instructions and deciding on which poetry questions you are going to answer. And then you will decide on which literature question to answer. Had we enough time, I would be able to go through the paper I've given you and show you, but I have to move on to paper 3. First additional language, you're going to use your reading time in a similar way to paper 1. You're going to read your instructions carefully, you're going to read your text carefully, you're going to read your questions and the important parts of your texts. What is something that both of you, home language, first additional language, what should you not do in paper 2? You should not read the entire paper. It is 23 pages long. First additional language, for the short stories, it might even be longer. So do not read your entire paper, you read your instructions, and that will help guide you to the next part. And there you've got contact acquired. You tackle paper 2. Okay, perfect timing. Paper 3. It's a nice short one. Okay, so paper 1, we bake a cake. Paper 2, we tackle. Paper 3, we build a nest. And we jump on a springboard. So there's 2 metaphors for this one. When you build a nest, okay, so it's not just birds that build nests. In researching this particular metaphor, I found that people build nests quite a bit. You have to plan. You have to plan where you're going to put the nest. You have to plan what materials you're going to use. Then the next thing that you have to do is you have to settle in your nest. Just imagine trying on a new pair of sneakers. Okay? The first 2 days, your foot is not settled in them. But the more you walk with them, the more your foot starts to settle in them. So when you build a nest, the bird has to settle, and then it can only lay its eggs. So write down, what do I mean by planning where? What I mean by this is to choose your topic. That's the first thing that you have to do to approach this paper. Planning what materials to use. This is your mind map or your planning of the essay. Here I won't be strict about mind map. There's many other ways to plan for your essay. What do I mean by settling? I mean a rough draft. And what do I mean by laying your eggs? Writing your final draft. Build a proper nest. There'll be no need for crying over broken eggs. Okay, so in your reading time, people, you have to use this to choose your essay topic. Okay? Think carefully. Are all of you from Pretoria? I don't know. Okay. But I just want to give you an example for 1 second. Perhaps this weekend has been taxing on you. You've spent some time sitting on this chair and you've had to listen to someone speak to you. Okay? People that have wanted to engage in you. I want you to imagine for a second what your marker is going through. This marker starts marking at 7 o'clock in the morning and pen down at 6 in the evening. There is a 15-minute break at 10 o'clock, another 15-minute break at 4 o'clock, and there is an hour lunch at 12 o'clock. That person has sat on that chair for 10 hours, and your essay lands up in front of them. Surely, you must realize that when you choose your topic, you want to do something that is just a little bit different from the person they've marked just before. So you've heard that saying, you're all unique? Never heard someone say you're unique, you're special? Well, people, you are all very unique, just like everybody else. That means that whether you like it or not, your first idea is going to be the first idea of at least 50,000 other people. Okay? If you're going to settle down in your first idea, you are going to be marked like the other 55,000 people. But if you're going to write like 55,000 other people, you're going to get the marks of 55,000 other people. You want to get the marks of those 3%, those people that write a bit differently. So here, there are some preparation strategies that we are going to do together and which you are going to revise at home. Okay. So, first of all, what 2 types of essays do you get? There's actually only 2 types. Stories and arguments. Okay? So, stories are usually based on the pictures of the essay topics, but any essay topic can be a story. And this is really where your imagination must come alive. So all of us think of similar things when we write our essays. But we must go beyond the obvious. So for example, if I had to give you that picture, all of us immediately think of the sea. Okay? We can do something else with that. We can talk about freedom, for example. Okay? Maybe you want to stick with your idea of the sea because you want to speak about a boat. Okay? Why don't you do something different? What about a boat that travels underneath the sea? What about a boat that travels, what about if this was another planet? Okay? You have to stick to your picture, but you can interpret it in any way you want. And remember, there was a question here where they asked about, it was you asked, will they read everything? People, they have to find a link. They have to find a link between your topic and the picture. You can't write about some obscure thing. You can't write about a desert. But even if you wrote about a desert and you contrasted desert to sea, there's your link. So your marker is going to find the link. Although I'm not saying that the responsibility is not in your boat, but you must realize that they will try and link everything that you've written to your topic. Okay, so try and make your writing different. You can interpret the picture in any way you want. Okay, glasses, spectacles, doesn't have to be about sight. It can be about something else. Okay, it can be about a spy who goes and breaks in somewhere, and the evidence he leaves behind is his glasses. Do you see the point that I'm trying to make? You don't always have to, a heart doesn't have to be love. Flowers that are broken and drooping doesn't have to be depression. Okay, it can be something else. Okay, I'm thinking of that picture of the flowers drooping. You know, so many people, when that picture was in the topic, so many people wrote about gender-based violence and they wrote about depression. It was so overwhelming to mark this. But I'm thinking about, what if something happened and you write some other story, and because of this story that happened, people forgot to water their flowers. There's your link. Okay, it doesn't always have to be about the first thing that you think of. Take your original idea, add something to it to make it different. Okay, so it will still link, but it can be completely different. Yes.
Miss, which topics are restricted from writing about?
Like what kind of content? I do have a slide about that. Will you wait, and then perhaps you can ask a question if you have any questions about that. Okay, so what kind of story essays do you get? You get your narrative essay, descriptive, reflective. This is what you all know, okay? So I've given you some examples. How about a narrative essay, the first day on a boat and then you crash and you discover some underwater world? A descriptive essay, so this is also like a narrative essay but focusing on all the things that you can see, hear, smell and touch. How about traveling on a distant planet where everything is blue? Okay? Or a reflective essay, a nice day on the beach where there's a shipwreck and you land on an abandoned island. So you take your original idea, you add something to it to make it different. The next type of essays that you get is argumentative. So this is when you're going to try and convince someone about a point. It can either be, abolishing plastic is an unrealistic expectation. This one was in paper 3 of last year. But this one was in, I think, 2016, Sticks in a Bundle are Unbreakable. Do you see how this one could be a narrative essay as well? But also an argumentative essay. So this one is more descriptive. This is the idea that when you're all together, it's more difficult to destroy you. Okay, so any essay, or most essays, can be argumentative as well as narrative, or like the story essays. There's two types of arguments that you get. You get your argumentative essay, and then you also get the discursive essay. So the discursive essay, this is when you are discussing 2 points. So you essentially would agree with your topic and you would disagree at the same time. Now, there is this false idea that an argumentative essay or arguments do not get high marks in paper 3. This is a false idea. Arguments, if you are not a good writer, go for the argumentative essay. If you follow your simple structure of writing an argumentative essay, you can get an easy 65%. Just from following the structure of writing an argumentative essay. What is the structure of an argumentative essay? Remember the hand? Okay. So arguments are also literature essays, speeches. Sometimes a transactional writing will be a speech. That's also an argument. Okay? So don't think that argumentative essays do not get good marks. In actual fact, there have been many times. Okay, let me not say many times. 3 times. So I've marked paper 3 since 2016. That makes me almost 8 years of marking paper 3. Of those 8 years, I've given 50 out of 50s. Not bad. Of those 50 out of 50s, 3 of them were argumentative essays. Do not think that you cannot get total for paper 3, and do not think that you cannot write a good argumentative essay and get a good mark. Okay, so how do I choose my topic? I use my reading time very carefully. I don't just choose the first topic that comes to my mind. There's some preparation that I can do at home. We'll speak about that on the next slide. And I'm going to look carefully at my essay topics. Think about, am I going to write argumentative? Am I going to write discursive? Am I going to write narrative? What am I going to write? Okay? And based off of that, I choose my topic. I do not simply go for the first one. I do not simply go for my first thought. I very often say, take your first thought, mentally crumble it up like you would crumble up a piece of paper, and throw it in the dustbin. And go to your second thought and say, what else? What else can I write about? Okay, so what materials do I use when I write my essay? I have to plan. Rough draft is not planning. Sorry, people, it's not. Okay? A planning is a mind map. But here I'm interpreting the concept of a mind map. I'm saying that you can do a traditional mind map like the one that I've shown you, but you can also use keywords and phrases to help you come up with ideas, and you can use question words. So this I don't have in your notes. Perhaps you want to quickly write this down. Keywords and phrases, mind map, questions. And then the next few slides will elaborate on what I mean by these things. So how do I use keywords and phrases? Well, this works very well for my picture or my story essays. It also works well to move from literal to figurative thinking. So here I've got a very strange picture for you. I've got a man with a rhino and an umbrella. So I would start by simply writing that down. Man, rhino, umbrella. Then I would think, okay, what does an umbrella represent? Something protective, something inclusive. Okay, what does a rhino represent? Okay, an animal, but also strength, power. What does a human represent? Okay, in this context, the human is weaker, but there is some kind of a relationship established between the two. Okay, so I can write a story about a man who was very brutal and strong. He met someone. He fell in love, and he protected this person. I've not mentioned a rhino, but I will still get my marks. Because the concept of strength is there, the concept of protection is there, and the concept of relationship is there. Okay, so this is what I mean. We do not have to always be literal. Okay, so you write down your thoughts. I'm looking at this last point here. How to use this planning is that you write down thoughts and ideas that you have. You try and incorporate the entire picture, and maybe you try and incorporate all your different ideas. Okay, so mind map, useful. And in actual fact, if you're writing an argumentative essay, you must use a mind map. Poetry essays, literature essays are all based on the spider diagram format, which is the circle with the 5 arrows that come out. But you can also use your hand, your thumb being the introduction, your pinky finger being your conclusion, and the 3 fingers in the middle being your body. I've also seen this quite often in the essays that I've marked. An arrow, the top part is the intro, bottom part is the conclusion, 3 parts in the middle is the body. I've also seen the burger. Any teacher who has taught the burger technique? Okay, I know that the Afrikaans teachers like to use the burger technique. So the bun, the patty, the tomato, and the lettuce. Okay. Lastly, how do I plan for my essays? I can use question words. So here you can actually combine this along with your other ways of planning. So here the questions that I'm looking at is who am I going to write about? Where is the story going to take place? When is the story going to take place? what is taking place and why is that taking place. What is important with this is that for some reason, many of you like to start your essays in the middle of the story, which can be effective if it is done correctly. But if you are very vague in your introduction, your marker is not going to know where you are. So if you have this, you're actually planning a plot the way a novelist would plan a book. So this helps you to do that. And then, unfortunately, it fell over to the next page, but I had a little speech bubble there which says which resonates with you the most. So right now, think which one do you like the most and circle that for yourself. You don't have to choose this. I'm just thinking based on your instinct right now, which one works the best for you. Okay, now I'm going to say something. Planning is not just what you write, but how you write it. And that is why I have a big 3, 2, 1 on the next page. Because 3, 2, 1 helps you to use some fancy words, some rhetoric language, and some idioms and quotes. Okay. Due to time constraints, I would like to do the transactional writing as well. Due to time constraints, I'm not going to go through it, but please do. There's some very nice prompts there, and you can actually tell your parents that in order to do the one on vocabulary, they need to buy you a packet of jelly tots and Smarties. So if you do the one on vocab with a packet of jelly tots and a packet of Smarties, then it will help you very much. Okay, I've also got some idioms and proverbs there, which is I have not given you the meaning for. You can go and research the meaning at your own time, and maybe this will inspire you to find some other idioms and proverbs to use in your writing. So, the last part of the essay is to settle down and to write a rough draft. The purpose of the rough draft is to alleviate and edit language errors. Do you get marks for rough draft? No. Is it important? Yes. It is also a very good backup. If you cannot complete your final, I can promise you now, your marker will go back and mark your rough draft from the point where you left off. So complete your rough draft in its entirety. Cross it out neatly. Do cross it out. But your marker will go and mark it. Okay. And then obviously final draft. Be very wary of including inappropriate information. So here I'm talking about swearing, drug and alcohol abuse, and sexual references. Be very wary of writing typical essays that everyone else would write about. COVID, environmental destruction, gender-based violence. It is not that these topics are not important, but everyone writes about them. Be careful of writing the essays that you write for LO. Essays about drug abuse, peer pressure, alcohol abuse. If you want to use these topics, be careful, put an imaginative twist on them. Be wary of writing boring essays. I have a few minutes to speak about transactionals. So, very recently we all watched the Olympics, and perhaps you would have noticed that there is a sport called diving. How do I dive? Well, first of all, I have to climb up a very tall ladder. And once I have gotten to the top of this tall ladder, I now need to jump and get myself as deep into the pool as possible. So I start by hopping on this board, and this board becomes a springboard, as you can see here, okay? And I start gaining momentum, and the more momentum I gain, eventually I hop up into the air and I dive straight down, and my aim in the sport of diving is to go as deeply as possible. Okay, so this is what we have to do with transactional writing. Here, our metaphor is diving. So, if you write down in your notes, what is climbing? Climbing is studying. You have to study for transactional writing. You must know your formats. What is the hopping? Planning. And what is the diving? The diving is the depth of the topic. Your language mark comes from your use of tone, register, and style. I've left this blank on purpose. I have not even included the definitions here, so that you can go and find out, what does this mean? You know what tone is. Register and style, we don't know. I will give you a hint. Register, the focus is on the vocabulary that you use, but style is the focus on the grammar that you use. Then, I've given you a list of your longer transactionals. You must know all of them. Any of them can be asked. Home language, I doubt you will get a CV. Home language, I doubt you will get an agenda. Okay. Then there's a list of shorter transactionals. This is only for first additional language. If you look on your last page, I've given you one that has not been included in the list because it is relatively new, but it is gaining popularity. So far it has been in 2 question papers in the last 3 years. They have seemed to move away from obituary in order to favor the email. They also seem to be including the formal report into the transactionals. This is dangerous. If you do not know what a formal report is, it is not a formal letter. So you have to avoid the formal report with everything inside of you if you do not know how to write it. If you do know how to write it, you'll know that there's at least 20 things that you have to memorize to write a formal report. So it is not one of them that I recommend. Okay, so I need to speak to you about how to hop. Okay. So how to hop, you need to find the key concepts in your topic. So here, my key concept is youth organization. Everyone circle youth organization. The next one is concert. The next one is town. The next one is director. The next one is providing feedback on the event. People, if you write me an email where you say, "Dear Director of Public Facilities, thank you for the for the opportunity for us to have a concert as the youth in our town. We think that you should work on your stadium because we had a problem with how dirty it was. Thank you very much." You've elaborated. But you are still not going to get a good mark for your transactional. Because what youth organization are you writing from, people? What concert was hosted? In what town are you staying? What is the name of this director? Surely, based off of this topic, if you were this person, you would know who the director was. Because you've worked with them before. Even though I don't know, I work at Tuxport High School, I don't personally know the director of the high performance sector, but I know that his name is Stephen Ball. So when I write an email thanking him for the use of his facilities, I'm going to write, "Thank you, Mr. Stephen Ball." I'm not going to write, "Thank you, sir." I'm going to use his name because that is the most polite way of reading it. My principal said she receives hundreds of emails a year, people wanting a job from her. She doesn't even look at the emails that don't use her name. Because if you want a job, surely you will do the research to find the name of the person. So people make up a name. Lie. You don't have to tell the truth when you write down your address in your letter. I'm not going to go and check, do you stay at number 33 Cherry Tree Lane? So you need to invent here. You need to elaborate on the topic. Provide feedback. Don't just say one thing, your stadiums are dirty. No, say, we like this, we dislike this, we recommend this, and end off. Don't just stay on the surface. You are not going to get a good mark for your dive if you stay on the surface. You want to dive down as deep as possible. When you have time and when you are preparing for paper 3, it's one of the first few papers that you write. Take a look at the memo, freely available on the internet. Take a look and you will see that high marks come from something they call highly elaborated. It means every single point. Practice this. I've given you a paper 3. Practice circling all the topics, even the ones that you don't usually like. Circle all the topics, the main ideas, and think, how would I develop this? What youth organization? I would write a youth organization about people in wheelchairs. That's what I would do. Okay? The concert would be, I don't know, Taylor Swift, who came to raise money for young people in wheelchairs. In my town of Standerton, I would name my director and I would give adequate feedback. There, 5 seconds, I've elaborated on my topic and I'll get a much higher mark. In actual fact, I'll get distinction between 80 and up just from elaborating on the key concepts. Okay, so use all your planning elements to write an in-depth response. Okay, so they have alerted me that we have another 10 minutes left, but I'm done with my presentation. Are there any questions that you would like to ask me very briefly? 5 minutes, sorry, 5 minutes. Yes.
Like, I just wanted to know, like, when it comes to an essay, right? Would you recommend, like, writing like normal English or like Victorian English?
No, always write in your normal English. You're obviously writing formal, so you're avoiding things like contractions and you're avoiding slang, which is made up words. But I wouldn't be, they use the word verbose. Verbose is when you are deliberately exaggerating the language that you're using. It doesn't fit. Remember, part of your language mark comes down to the tone that you're using as well as your register. So the way, your style and the way you've written it. So no, not Victorian English. Write normally. Write the way you speak. But go to those 3, 2, 1 points that I've given to build on your vocabulary. Do that. Build on vocab, build on rhetoric language. Okay. Yes.
Let's say that my students we use like the words that were brought into the Oxford Dictionary, and the teachers don't know about it, the grammar.
Slang words. So
they're in the dictionary and they're actual words. But like they're really edited.
no, don't worry about that. If it's so you then speaking about colloquial language, everyday spoken language, it will depend on your transactional. Be careful, however, you still want to be semi-formal is the word I'm going to use here. Okay, so you are allowed to use it. For example, I'm thinking of, let's say you have a phrase from another language, okay? You're allowed to include that, but in brackets, just write what the meaning is in English. This means that you're still writing in English, but you've got a saying that you have a meaning that will only come across in Zulu. You can do that, but you translate it into English. only a few words though. So I hope that gives you a guide to the answer. Another question?
Ma'am, when we're doing this essay, when we have to use the method, if we include the point.
The most effective way would be to do both. Okay. So to link it to the point, and even if you have to have another sentence, even if you have to be as obvious as saying, this point links to my topic in this way. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I enjoyed this very much. I hope that this helps you, and I do believe it will.